Okay, so picture this for a second. You're lying in bed on a Sunday night, and instead of sleeping, you're doing that thing where you open your banking app and just stare at the number. Not because anything's wrong exactly, but because you had one of those days at work. You know the one, where your manager says something completely reasonable and you still go home and think, I cannot do this for another 20 years. And then this thought creeps in, uninvited, like it always does. What if I didn't have to? What if instead of grinding away until 65, you could actually be done, really done, in 10 years? Not, I bought a boat and I'm retired done necessarily, but done in the sense that work becomes optional. A choice instead of a sentence. Honestly, that thought has kept me up more nights than I'd like to admit. My name is Steve, and I spend way too much time thinking about money, about the psychology behind why some people build wealth almost effortlessly, while others feel like they're sprinting on a treadmill that never stops, and about this very specific question, the one you're probably here for, which is, how much would you actually need to invest every single month to retire in just 10 years? Because here's the thing nobody tells you. The answer isn't some fixed number that applies to everybody, like a magic $2,000 a month formula you copy and paste into your life. It depends on where you're starting, what retire even means to you, and this is the part that surprises people, it depends way more on a couple of controllable levers than most people realize. And by the end of this video, I think you're going to walk away with a completely different sense of whether 10 years is actually realistic for you, and more importantly, exactly what number you'd need to hit it. So let's just get into it, because there's a lot to unpack here, and some of it is going to sting a little before it feels good. Here's where almost everyone gets stuck before they even start. They say, I want to retire in 10 years, the same way they'd say, I want to lose weight, or I want to read more, as this vague, floaty aspiration that sounds nice but has no actual shape to it. But retirement, real mathematical retirement, has a shape. It has a number. And that number is built on one basic idea called the safe withdrawal rate. Basically, financial researchers have found that if you have a big enough investment portfolio, you can withdraw around 4% of it every year, adjusted for inflation, and, statistically, not run out of money over a long retirement. Some people now argue for something closer to 3.5% to be extra safe, especially if you're retiring young and need your money to last, 50 plus years instead of 30. So here's the math trick that changes everything. If you know how much annual income you want in retirement, you multiply that number by 25. That's the inverse of a 4% withdrawal rate. And boom, that's your retirement number. Let's make it real. Say you're living on $50,000 a year right now, and you figure you could keep living comfortably on that in retirement, especially once the mortgage is paid off or the kids are grown. $50,000 times 25 is $1,250,000. That's your target. That's the mountain you're climbing. And I want to pause here because I think this is the moment where a lot of people either get really motivated or really deflated, and look, both reactions are valid. $1.25 million is a big number. It's supposed to feel big. But here's why this step matters so much. Without this number, you're just investing blindly, hoping it works out, the way people wander into a grocery store hungry with no list and end up with like 7 kinds of crackers and no actual dinner. You need the list. The number is the list. So, actionable takeaway here, before you even think about a monthly dollar amount, sit down and figure out your enough number. What does your life cost realistically in retirement? Multiply that by 25. Write it on a sticky note. That's not the scary part of this video, by the way. The scary part is next. All right, so now we get to the part where I ruin everyone's Sunday night. If your target is $1,250,000 and you're starting from zero, and you assume a fairly optimistic 8% average annual return in the market, which, to be fair, is roughly in line with long-term historical stock market averages, you would need to invest around $6,800 per month for 10 years straight to hit that number. I'll let that sit there for a second. $6,800 every month for a decade. For most people watching this, that number probably just landed somewhere between physically impossible and extremely funny. And honestly, that's the right reaction. Because here's the uncomfortable truth this whole video is built around. For the overwhelming majority of people, retiring in 10 years on a traditional salary starting from zero with a normal lifestyle is just not mathematically realistic. And I'd rather tell you that clearly now than have you feel like a failure in year 3 when you realize you're nowhere close. But, and this is important, that doesn't mean the goal is stupid or that this video is pointless. It means the goal requires you to change some of the underlying variables. Not just white-knuckle your way through the same math everyone else is doing. Think of it like this. If someone told you they wanted to run a marathon in 10 weeks and they're currently unable to jog around the block, you wouldn't say impossible, give up. You'd say, okay, what needs to change? Your training, your diet, your starting weight, your definition of marathon. Same thing here. The lever isn't just invest more money, although that's part of it. The real levers are the target number itself, your timeline flexibility, your income, and your expenses. And honestly, probably all 4 at once. So let's actually break down what moving those levers looks like, because this is where it gets genuinely interesting. Lever 1. Shrink your number. Remember that 25 times multiplier? It cuts both ways, brutally. If you can figure out how to live well on $30,000 a year instead of $50,000 through downsizing, moving somewhere with a lower cost of living, paying off debt completely before you retire, your target drops from $1,250,000 to $750,000. That's not a small difference. That's the difference between needing $6,800 a month and needing something closer to $4,100 a month. Same math, same 8% return assumption, dramatically different monthly burden just because you redefined enough. And look, I know just spend less sounds like the most annoying advice in personal finance, the kind of thing your uncle says at Thanksgiving right before he tells you about his crypto portfolio. But I'm not talking about clipping coupons here. I'm talking about actually sitting down and asking, honestly, what does my life need to cost? Because a lot of us are funding a lifestyle we backed into, not one we chose on purpose. Lever 2. Extend the runway, just slightly. 10 years is an emotionally satisfying number because it's round and it's dramatic, right? Retire in a decade sounds incredible on a thumbnail, but the math between 10 years and, say, 13 or 14 years is not linear. It's exponential because compound growth needs time to actually compound. Stretching your timeline from 10 to 14 years on that same million-dollar target can sometimes cut your required monthly investment by 30, even 40%, because you're giving the market more years to do the heavy lifting instead of you. I know. This feels like cheating, like I just told you. The secret to running a faster marathon is to take longer. But financial independence isn't really about hitting an arbitrary number on an arbitrary date. It's about building a system that reliably gets you free. If adding 3 or 4 years means the difference between a plan that's actually achievable and one that requires an $6,800 monthly miracle, that's not failure. That's just realism doing its job. Lever 3. Increase your income, specifically to funnel into investing. This is the one people avoid talking about because it's harder to control than cutting expenses, but it's honestly often the biggest lever of all. A side business, a career pivot, negotiating a raise, freelancing on weekends, none of this is glamorous, and none of it happens overnight. But the math doesn't care about your feelings about it. Every extra $1,000 a month you can direct toward investments accelerates your timeline in a way that spending cuts alone usually can't match, because there's a floor to how much you can cut, but there's no real ceiling on how much you can earn. Lever 4, and this one's sneaky, your investment returns and how you structure them. I'm not talking about chasing risky, get-rich-quick stuff. Please, for the love of all that is holy, do not go put your retirement plan into some meme coin because a guy on the internet told you to. I'm talking about things like maximizing tax-advantaged accounts, 401ks with employer matches, IRAs, HSAs used as stealth retirement accounts, because the tax savings alone can functionally boost your effective return by several percentage points a year. An employer match, by the way, is literally free money, and if you're not capturing it, you are, and I say this with love, leaving part of your paycheck on the table every single month. Let's ground this in a story because numbers on their own tend to slide right off the brain. I think about a guy, I'll call him Danny, though that's not his real name, who came into this whole thing wanting exactly what you probably want. Out in 10 years, no more soul-crushing commute, no more dread on Sunday nights. Danny was 34, made about $75,000 a year, had some student loan debt still lingering, and basically nothing invested yet. On paper, the traditional 10-year plan for someone in his position was a joke. There was no version of his current life where $6,000 or $7,000 a month in investments was even remotely feasible. So Danny did something that a lot of people resist doing, which is he got honest about the levers. He and his partner decided they didn't actually need a 4-bedroom house in an expensive suburb. They moved somewhere about 40% cheaper in cost of living, which alone reshaped what enough meant for their retirement number. He picked up freelance consulting on the side using skills from his day job, which added maybe $1,500 a month. Inconsistent, but real. And this is the part I love. He stopped thinking of 10 years as sacred and reframed his real target as somewhere between 12 and 14 years, which took an enormous amount of pressure off the monthly number. By doing all three of those things at once, Danny's required monthly investment dropped from an impossible $6,800 to something like $2,400. Was that still a stretch? Absolutely. It required real sacrifice, real discipline, some genuinely uncomfortable conversations about what they were and weren't going to spend money on. But it went from mathematically impossible fantasy to hard but doable plan, and there is an enormous, almost physical difference between those two categories. One crushes your motivation, the other one, even though it's still hard, gives you something to actually walk toward. That's the shift I want for you watching this. Not give up on early retirement, but stop measuring yourself against a number that was never built for your actual life. Quick digression here because I think this gets lost in all the "how much should I invest" conversations, where you invest matters almost as much as how much. If you're stuffing money into a regular taxable brokerage account for everything, you're missing out on some genuinely powerful tools. Contributing to a 401k, especially up to your employer match, is basically an instant guaranteed return before your money has even touched the market. Because free matching dollars are, again, free. A Roth IRA lets your growth compound completely tax-free, which over 10 years of aggressive investing can mean tens of thousands of dollars that simply never gets touched by the IRS. And for people planning genuinely early retirement, there are strategies, Roth conversion ladders, taxable brokerage bridges, designed specifically to access retirement funds before the traditional age 59 and a half without penalties. I won't go deep into the mechanics of all of that here because honestly that's a whole separate video, but the takeaway is this. Two people investing the exact same monthly amount at the exact same return can end up with meaningfully different outcomes purely based on account structure and tax strategy. So before you obsess only over the monthly dollar figure, make sure the vehicle carrying that money isn't leaking value along the way. And this is maybe the most important thing I'll say in this entire video, so stay with me for a second. Every single one of these calculations, the $6,800, the $2,400, whatever your personal number turns out to be, assumes something that is honestly the hardest part of the entire process, that you actually invest that amount every single month without fail for the entire 10, 12, 14 years, not most months. Not when things are tight, I'll skip it and catch up later. Every month, markets will drop 20% in a year that scares you. Life will throw a surprise medical bill or a job loss or some family emergency directly into your plan's path. And the people who actually hit these numbers aren't the ones with the cleverest spreadsheet. They're the ones who treated their monthly investment like a bill that has to be paid, not a suggestion they get to when things feel comfortable. Honestly, the math is the easy part. The emotional discipline to keep going when the market's down 25% and everyone online is panicking, that's the actual skill being tested here. So, let's bring it all the way back around. If you came into this video hoping I'd hand you one clean number, invest exactly X dollars a month and you'll retire in a decade, I hope what you got instead was something more useful, an actual framework for figuring out your number and a real understanding of why that number might feel impossible at first glance. Because here's what I really want you to sit with. Retiring in 10 years starting from zero on an average income with average expenses is genuinely hard for almost everyone. And if the number I mentioned earlier made your stomach drop a little, that's not you failing at money. That's just math being honest with you for once, which, let's be real, doesn't happen very often in personal finance content online. But the levers are real. Shrinking your target number, stretching your timeline by even a couple of years, growing your income even modestly, and structuring your investments wisely. Stack even 2 or 3 of those together, and suddenly a fantasy turns into a plan. Not an easy plan, but a real one, with real numbers, that you could actually walk toward starting this month if you wanted to. And maybe that's the thing I want to leave you with. You don't need a miracle. You don't need to have started 10 years ago, and you don't need $6,800 sitting around every month like it's nothing. You just need to get honest about your number, honest about your levers, and then, and this is the unglamorous part nobody puts on a thumbnail, you just need to keep showing up month after month, even when it's boring, even when the market dips, even when it feels like nothing's happening. Because it is happening, quietly, slowly, in the background of your life, every single month you invest, it's happening. So take a minute this week, do the math for your own life, figure out your real number, and then just take the first step. That's genuinely all this is. One honest number and one small monthly decision. Repeat it until it changes everything.
Yeah,
Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.